This is Wednesday, August 4th at 5 p.m. This is a special meeting and board self-assessment for District 96. Kathy, can you call the roll?
Ms. Murphy? Here. Mr. Barsadi?
Present.
Mr. Meredith?
Here.
Ms. Gunn?
Here.
Ms. Kleiber?
Here.
And Mr. Hunt?
Here.
Quorum is present.
All right. At this time, is there any public comment?
No additional.
No additional. We do have one email here. Yep. Okay. I will read that. It's titled Questions for the Board from Jennifer Mayati. 1, if students will be allowed to eat lunch without masks, will they be allowed to remove them for gym class activities? If not, will there be opt-out of gym option? 2, if students visit a red state listed on the Cook County Travel Advisory, will they have to quarantine upon returning to Illinois, even though it is an advisory, not a mandate? And this is, thank you, Jennifer, is what's listed. So no additional emails or?
There are not.
Okay. All right. At this time, are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Okay. If not, let's see. We will get into board action. The first item listed is the 2021-2022 Return to School Approval Resolution. At this
Oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Should I make the motion?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. At this time, is there a motion to approve the 2021-2022 Return to School Approval Resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All right, and I assume there will be discussion.
So what I wanted to do is just update for everybody the presentation that was shared at the last board meeting, and I can click through this fairly quickly. I know everybody in the room knows that the governor today at 2:30 announced a mandate for all school children and staff, regardless of vaccination status, to be wearing masks. And that was one of the things that we had anticipated that we might be having more discussion on. The other is the saliva screening. So I'll just, again, just to click through for everybody, we know that our students are returning to a full sort of normal school day wearing masks. That's pre-K through 8th grade. And it really is through ISB resolution. The ISB requires all Illinois school children to return for in-person learning, except for in rare exceptions, which could be home hospital or children that might need the remote academy through our West 40 school district. People have asked about the lunch schedule. We will have lunch served, not served, we will have lunch available at the schools or lunch period back to, again, normal times. Families will still be bringing brown bag lunch as they have in the past. And we're still looking at how we're going to serve lunch at Hauser and Central, and we may still be doing brown bag lunches for those groups too. We don't really want children in a cafeteria style line being served food. So we're looking at some modifications there still, but we will not be returning to our spring version where we were kind of pleading with families to take children home if they possibly could do that, and most did that, which we were very appreciative of at the time. Right now it's our preference that children stay in school all day. It helps with just our structure and overall student safety and student needs. But there are some families that have said, could I still take my child home for lunch? Of course they could. That's always been an option for families. Our before and after care service will resume with Riverside Parks and Rec at all 4 of our elementaries. Our co-curriculars are also approved for moving forward. I know I met with our sports conference earlier this week. We've agreed that girls volleyball will be a masked indoor sport, and now the mask mandate would make that necessary anyway. Soccer is our other fall sport. It's outdoors, so that children would have an opportunity to participate without masks on because the mask wearing is not required outdoors. We will look at whether or not our student athletes should go through additional saliva screening. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. We had mentioned, we met last time, that the health and safety protocols seem to be shifting kind of in real time, as we know from today. So again, the things that really haven't changed for right now is social distancing will continue at that 3 to 6 foot spacing. It'll mostly be 3 feet in most of our classrooms, same for lunch. Quarantine exposure will be evaluated really based on what the exposure was. Was the child wearing masks, the adult wearing masks, was social distancing being honored? What is the vaccination status of the individual? And also the participation in saliva screening. So again, this is an area that's kind of changing. We're waiting on updated decision tree from the Illinois Department of Public Health that will speak to kind of the inclusion, exclusion when a child has to be sent home. So expect more detail on all of that right now. But that, again, hasn't really changed since our last time. We've been waiting for some of that additional detail to come. Educational services will be provided to children who are in quarantine and who are not vaccinated. So, again, quarantine could change for that vaccinated 12 years old and up at Hauser, but otherwise we know that our youngest children, obviously children 12, under 12 are not vaccinated. We're still looking for Illinois State Board of Ed to make some recommendations about how that would look. Meeting with our leadership team today, we're anticipating really offering up live stream to the students that are on quarantine, and then probably some kind of almost like office hours check-in with perhaps their classroom teacher or perhaps our permanent substitute teacher, sort of being the person that would check in, make sure children are aware of what they need to complete, whether it's some homework, schoolwork, etc. The live stream access will probably be a little bit different than the true remote academy in that children will have access to the classroom. And again, given that the great majority of children we expect would be in the classroom, we're hoping quarantine numbers are really low. That it wouldn't be sort of, it may not always feel like that same very directed instruction, but an opportunity to kind of see what's going on, participate to the best of their abilities, and then have that teacher check-in or substitute teacher check-in so that they understand what the classes are and what the expectations might be. So again, we are not going to be requiring the daily Raptor screening, but parents will be asked for a one-time acknowledgement that they understand that they absolutely cannot send their children to school with any signs or symptoms that could be COVID. And as we know from last year, that's just about any kind of childhood illness symptom. The HEPA air filters were added to all classrooms and large group spaces. We kind of did that over the course of last spring. We also, I know, parents had reached out and said, what about open windows and outdoor education? We're still putting our tents back up. We'll be opening windows where we have the operable windows, which is in many of our classrooms, but not all. Obviously, good hand hygiene and good cleaning procedures will continue to be part of our protocol overall. The big one was masks, and I said universal masking is now really the mandate. Not really, it is the mandate coming directly from the governor's office. The governor also indicated that he would be the one to determine when masking would change, right? So I would guess that it's going to have something to do with the level of transmission in a community area, but it's not something that I expect will change sort of quickly and in short term, but probably being monitored overall, and then we would be told when we might be a community that could shift that. And then we would decide potentially it would go back to a local decision, because I know, for example, just one thought would be, would we have vaccinated individuals maybe have a different masking requirement than an unvaccinated individual? And again, it's really too soon to sort of make those predictions. Now the mandate is absolutely clear. They are saying that masks are not required outdoors, so kids would still have that opportunity to take a mask break and be outside for play. If we think there's activities where children may be really, for lack of a better word, bunched up upon each other, we'll ask them to have their masks on. But looking forward to giving kids outdoor opportunities to have their masks off. The other conversation that we have as a board action item for tonight would be participating in the SHIELD saliva testing program. It's something we have talked about a little bit sort of over the past even couple months. So the SHIELD program is through the University of Illinois. It would really replace the program that we had with District 102. SHIELD would be offered to us free of charge. I know at the last meeting, I think, David, you had asked what that meant for the setup fees. The setup fees are also at zero, so it's really a completely free opportunity for our school district. A couple things that are just a little bit different than the saliva screening we participated in last year is that it is now considered diagnostic in nature. So again, if a child even had sort of a sniffles or some question or some concern, they could participate in a kind of an extra bout or an extra round of saliva screening. They would still need to go home while we're waiting for results. And again, this is all shifting because we're now in a higher transmission area, that this idea of testing to stay may not be an option, at least not right now in terms of where we are, but our nurses are looking at all of that. But again, the saliva screening is diagnostic. So even if we were sending a child home, if they had to stay in quarantine, it still is easier, I think, than sending a child off to, a COVID testing facility. So we're also looking at the possibility of acquiring a number of the Binex Now quick tests. That's the one where you get the results in 15 minutes. They do recommend that you kind of do those in serial combination, where you repeat them maybe on days 1, 3, 5 or something before you, again, during this period of high transmission in particular. A couple things about the saliva screening that are different. They do require an on-site sample collection. As you know, with the 102 program, we had families the children came with their saliva sample that they had either done the night before or the morning of. The SHIELD program does require it to occur at school. That's a bit of a difference, sort of both good and bad. Maybe it's not as challenging for families. I know some families have already said they're worried, though, about their child doing that at school. Is that going to sort of be scary or uncomfortable? Other people have said that they may do that more comfortably at school when the teacher asks them to do it or the person from the U of I asks them to do that. So, and again, that could change, but it is part of their approval process and what they call a chain of custody requirement here. So, again, free to us, no initial setup fees, even as a Tier 4 school. The SHIELD team would manage all the logistics for us because it's free. I know when we were wondering if we had to pay for it, if we would manage our own logistics, and if so, what costs might come with that. So, so that is, again, something that we are going to, the board's going to consider tonight. So we had talked about, and I don't want to make light of teaching and learning and the importance of learning recovery and the social emotional needs of our students. But I know, again, tonight the resolution was really about kind of the school safety and safety protocols and the safe reopening of schools. I shouldn't even say reopening. It's just I see it's our 21-22 school year, as we were open last school year and last spring with most of our students in person. So with that, I think there are, again, just the really, and again, probably should modify this. I wrote this even before 2:30 today, but looking at the mask wearing, again, it's a mandate, so there's no formal determination that's needed. Just through the resolution, the board would be approving me to essentially have the decision-making authority to look at the safety options for the school. You would essentially be confirming this idea of a health wellness screening one time to start the year as opposed to a daily version. And then probably we should do the saliva screening as a separate action item, but we would be embedding the saliva screening into part of all that.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
I know I'll try to be quick. With the SHIELD testing, I know you said that they will handle the logistics. Will our nurses at each building still be handling the communication to families, or who does that if there is some kind of test result that needs?
Right. So it's a good question. So once we approve this, we're then assigned what they call a relationship logistics manager. And we have kind of talked at both in just the preliminary conversations that it could go either way. I think they would. Actually, I think they would handle everything, but I think they do ideally want to give the information directly to the school and have the nurse be the one to contact a family.
Yeah,
with
okay.
a
It's just interesting
positive
because it's a totally different setup, so thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Kind of a spin-off of that with the quarantine stuff, but I know it's still kind of changing, we gotta get
Yeah.
clarity on it, but I know that was extremely convoluted, the massive chart
Yeah,
that the
yeah.
IDPH sent out, and parents were very, very confused as to what, how, and I know a lot of us were confused, and
Right.
the staff was, so I didn't, anything we could do to try to put something, like an updated document on
Yeah.
the district site, I think would be really helpful, once we actually know
Right.
a little bit more about what's needed and stuff.
Yeah, and I had a superintendent's meeting on Monday with the West 40 superintendents, and, the question was, what do you need? And we said, we all need the new exclusion tree. We all need, the Illinois Department of Public Health to update this during this period of what's considered high transmission, kind of when does a child need to be sent home, or an adult for that matter, on quarantine, and for how long, and when does testing allow you to come back or shorten up that quarantine? So there are a number of questions there that I think everyone feels are really in flux right now, just because the numbers have shifted so much in terms of the transmission in the community. So we will get that out to everybody. We'll get it up on our website. We can share it out through other communication. I mean, what I am anticipating would be after tonight, either Thursday or Friday, sending out a communication to families with obviously information about mask wearing. I don't know that would be a surprise to anybody at this point in time. And then also just where we are with our vaccination plan. And so the one sort of, I guess, area for more discussion from the board is this idea of opting in versus opting out. And we had really talked about both last time. And I think there's kind of mixed sentiment on which one is better. This idea that children, that we would ask, you would opt out, meaning everybody's in unless you formally opt out. The other is to ask for explicit consent to opt in. I think the perhaps the more recommended way would be to have the opt-in explicit consent. You know, that we certainly don't intend to in any way want anybody to feel tricked or confused or anything in terms of participation in the saliva screening. But I will tell you, I do know that school districts are going with the opt-out, meaning you're automatically in unless you opt out, just to build higher levels of participation. So to me, that's still, I guess, a choice here for the board in terms of more discussion.
Do we have any guidance from council on that?
So both are fair options to consider. I think legally preferring explicit consent. Again, we're talking about young children. We're talking about collecting their saliva in school. You know, we talked about it's not being done at home. We're now, you know, doing it with a staff protocol here. And it would actually be U of I staff hired by SHIELD, I should say. Don't anticipate that it's our own staff. One idea is just if you want to do the opt-out, just to make sure that we have very layered, heavy communication to parents. You know, so that's certainly something I could do. We could even set it up, as we know, through School Messenger, a daily or every other day. Remember, you know, all children will be participating in saliva screening unless we explicitly hear from you to opt your child out. And so if we were sending that frequently, regularly, and making sure that there's just, you know, sending it in multiple languages, et cetera, you know, so it's certainly doable, and it's not something that our legal counsel opposes. It's just they would probably prefer for us the other way of the explicit consent, opting in.
The way I'm kind of interpreting that is either option is perfectly acceptable. It's just whether you're comfortable with minors and like the collecting of samples and stuff. Is that a fair, like very high level recap, so to speak?
Yeah. Other questions
When do we have to make that decision?
about the opt-in or opt-out? It would be helpful to make it tonight, just because.
I have feelings.
Yeah, I'd like to start the communication to families, and I was ready to send the consent form, you know, so it's the consent form it's either an opt-out consent form or it's an opt-in consent form, so I guess it matters which form I would be sending.
I guess my thought, as I said last time, I do think we need to do the explicit opt-out. I mean, this is a public health issue, and we have to address it as such. My concern is, I agree with you, we should do a lot of communication, layered communication, but if we end up doing that like sort of every week or very frequently, like beyond the first time we do this, it almost seems like we're going to be sort of implying that people shouldn't be participating in this and sort of trying to incentivize, like saying, well, you really don't need to do this. I think this is really critical that we need to do this. I think we should communicate explicitly and very much that you can opt out and do all that heavy communication up front, but I don't think we need to do it beyond the initial, beyond the initial setup.
And go ahead. I was going to say, I think families that really know they don't want their child to participate, hopefully they'd be, you know, attending to that, and they would let us know right away, my child is not participating, I am opting out. I don't want it to be, again, that inadvertent, like you didn't know, you just had missed the communication somehow, and we know that
Right,
does happen.
I'm not saying we
yeah.
don't communicate, I'm saying we
Yeah.
communicate, but we don't, I
Yeah.
don't think we need to be doing it every week.
I think from an aspect of protecting the district, and that's assuming we would go down that avenue, but we definitely have to be mindful of that. We need to be mindful of folks' rights, we have to be mindful of
No, I understand,
exposing
but I
the
guess,
district to liability.
I guess what Martha just said is our legal counsel said we can go either way.
Yeah, it's not so much about getting sued, it's just what do we want to do.
Right.
And we have the right to require it as much as we have the right to ask for consent.
I don't know if it's a right, and I don't know if that's something that's been determined yet. I mean, I definitely recall last year some districts who were mandating it, not an opt-out necessarily, but, you know, those districts were getting sued, and I'm not sure if those, I don't recall if any of them were ever resolved one way or the other.
Oak Park, didn't Oak Park mandate it? District?
I know Park right now is doing an opt-out, just because they just released a parent communication, I think yesterday or today that I saw. Schools are doing it both ways.
I'm sorry, excuse me, could I ask who you are and who you're with?
I'm with Fox 32.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for asking. I thought maybe we had a technology issue or should check on it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, fine. So I think it's kind of a matter of preference and comfort discretion on this one.
Yeah. I mean, just my 2 cents. I certainly feel more comfortable with an opt-in. I'm probably the minority here. I just feel, I feel like opting out is a way of tricking people, and that's historically how it's been. And I know that's not what we're trying to do here.
Right.
So, I mean, I can be convinced that an opt-out is appropriate if there is clear and constant communication, is how I feel. Because we all know how the busy the start of the school year is, and how many emails we miss, and people's lives are crazy right now. I might miss an email about it, and then my 8-year-old comes home and tells me, and I have no idea what they're talking about. Like not every week through the whole school year, but it needs to be consistently communicated for the start of the school year for weeks, in my opinion, because I think that's just something people need to know they've given consent to. For me, it just feels uncomfortable, the opt-out. I could be convinced with a very clear communication plan, though.
I think from a public health standpoint, I think the opt-out is a obviously more reliable way to get
100%.
statistics and data, and I
100%.
think that's our best course of keeping children in the classroom. I totally agree with Linda, though regular communication is absolutely a must. As someone, besides being a parent myself and working with parents, regular communication is absolutely essential because, like Linda's saying, we're all busy. Things happen, you miss things, and I don't mind regular communication. I actually usually appreciate it when they remind me of things, and I don't think people would find it a deterrent at all.
And I think you had said this, Martha, but regular communication in multiple languages
Mhm.
is,
Absolutely.
I think that's very important to make sure that everybody is fully
Yeah.
understanding what is going on.
And even to have an opportunity for parents to come and ask questions,
Yeah.
I think that would be a wonderful way to mitigate any worries, or if they really want to make sure that they are heard, that's absolutely
Right.
important.
And we can even do paper versions right at the start of the school. I mean, I think there are ways to really layer in intensive communication, but I agree, parents are busy and people do miss an email or they do miss a flyer, and, collecting saliva in schools is highly unusual. It's something, never probably before contemplated before the pandemic. So it's an unusual thing to do, and we certainly don't want people to feel, misled or tricked into it somehow. So there's a challenge in that.
Linda, you're not alone on that. I definitely have reservations. I definitely understand that there's a lot of, we're entering a contentious time again. There's a lot of scary headlines out there, and we seem to have been thrown back from an area of relative comfort to things are unknown again. But I just want to remind everyone that we had an opt-in policy last year, and our year was quite successful. And yes, we did have positive cases. We had very minimal in-school transmission. It's just something I urge folks to take a breath and take a look at how we ran things last year. I think we can be just as successful this year.
Right.
And I can understand your point, Dan, but it's a little bit different than last year. Last year, I mean, not to say we were just dealing with COVID, but we're dealing with a much more contagious and much more variant. And the studies already come out. The kids are
Some studies have come out, not many.
No, but but not studies. I'm saying
Go ahead.
kids who are getting sick, hospitalizations is the younger set that's getting hospitalized. It's not the people who have been vaccinated. And we're dealing, and most of our population is unvaccinated. And so
For
I
now.
don't look at this as opt-out as any trickery or anything like that. I mean,
Yeah, and there's no intention of triggering it
Right.
anyway, but I do think there's a history of that opting out to be used in situations to not be transparent. Therefore, I'm just a little cautious about it. I fully agree that if we do the opt-out, the participation rates are going to be way higher, which then makes the school even more safer. So I can appreciate that, and I could be swayed to go along with that with a very, clear communication strategy. I just wanted to make sure that, to me, it's a gray area and it's a little bit uncomfortable. I know this is a very we're in a pandemic, so things
Right.
aren't always done the way they're usually done, but.
and the difference also with last year's wasn't diagnostic.
Yeah.
This test is diagnostic. So,
And it's being offered to all schools.
Right.
I mean, it's not,
Yes.
we were in the beginning one of the only ones doing it, and now this is a much more common practice, so.
We have a virus that's twice as transmissible as the original alpha variant, so that does concern me, and I think anything that we can do to, remember, if we're going to test to stay in the classroom, if that's indeed what the governor and their office is saying, I'm still trying to understand that too, Martha, but I think that is the way to keep children in the classroom. I don't think the majority of parents would feel tricked, and I'm hoping that we would obviously provide that overabundance of communication.
Sure, I would agree. If the majority of parents feels comfortable with it, then they would feel just as comfortable opting in. But I understand and I hear you, and it definitely, from what we know so far, and we don't know a whole lot, but from what we know, it is more contagious. It is, there are aspects to it that are scarier, or at least scarier than they've been for a while. But again, something to look forward to is that, yes, most of our students in our district aren't eligible for a vaccine now, but it's quite possible before we get too far into the school year, they might be. So that's just something to consider.
I mentioned it at the last meeting, similar to what Linda was saying, just at the time, and even still now leaning more towards the opt-in. Piggybacking a little bit on last year, the high percentage of families that opted in for that test, I get that the actual weekly numbers were lower as they were being conducted at home. But the fact that this is a diagnostic test, we might get more families wanting to opt in. And then all of the remote learners from last year that did not have the option of saliva testing, I don't want to assume that all those families would also want to opt in, but perhaps as well. So
Yeah.
I just feel like we might have a really high percent of opting in, and it would perhaps negate some of the issues that we're feeling with the opt-out.
So
But we don't know in advance, obviously, how many.
And on that point, assuming with as many emails as we got about people saying, I was in remote, I'm happy to be coming back, all that, I'm going to make an assumption that they would. So just like looking at the numbers, I pulled up the participation rates that we had toward the end of the year, which fell by 4 or 5 points. But if you take who was participating, but then here, the saliva test, I remember there was once or twice I almost forgot, or I took it and I put it somewhere and then I forgot to take it with me. This is being collected in school, so for the 74% of the students that opted in, there is no forgetting if that was a component of the 15% gap. So that might help drive up actual testing. And then if the 30% that were remote are coming in and they opt in, I mean, we're looking at 60% if you just look at not to throw a bunch of numbers out, but those that actually participated plus the 30% that are remote, assuming they would get us to about 60%. And then if we actually have full 75% participate, we could probably get some pretty good numbers. But I'm dead honest. I'm straight up on the fence and making a decision tonight about this. So I agree with everything you said. I agree with everything you said. I really don't.
I feel like this whole conversation, I've been talking and trying to convince myself both ways. I do feel like I've been talking on both sides of it, so.
Yeah, no, because they're
firmly
absolutely
agree.
both viable.
Yeah.
To pile on Leslie and Linda's point, yes, I could be convinced either way. Right now, I'm leaning towards opt-in for a couple reasons. Martha, you mentioned, yes, it is unique to collect saliva in school. Great, but it's also unique to be in a pandemic. So I'm not sure that the uniqueness makes it special. Right? We are dealing with a situation right now. This is what we're faced with, so that part of that is kind of gotta suck that up. Dan, to your point, yes, we were successful last year, but I think this year is certainly different because we will be in school all day, full time. So we are looking at many more students in the building at the same time, and so therefore, there's greater possibilities for contact. I'll just leave it at that. Linda, you mentioned people might be saying trickery. I think to your point with communication, 3 communications before the start of school and a flyer, I don't accept the idea. I would not accept a parent telling me they were tricked.
And it's not that I think
No, and
that
I
people
don't-
think
I'm
they'd
sorry,
be
I'm
tricked.
not
I
saying
think
you're
that this
saying
technique has
that.
been used to cloud
Yes.
transparency in the past. I'm not saying that I think anybody would actually think that. I'm just saying that, in my,
No, I'm
you know,
using you
yeah.
as kind of an example,
Right.
not picking on you specifically, but the idea that a parent is going to say that somehow we're being sneaky or underhanded.
yeah, and again,
We're
it's not that I think
communicating.
people would think that. I just think that in the past that has been used that way.
Oh, I think there are some people who would say
Yeah,
that.
maybe.
And that's why I'm saying, that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
That's not an acceptable statement when you've got emails, and you've got phones that beep for no good reason.
Somebody has an opinion on this?
Yes.
On their phone.
And, electronic and paper ought to be sufficient, so.
So we've given you really clear guidance here, Martha.
I'm trying to count. No.
Well, I think we're all universal that we're going to do it.
Yes, oh, absolutely, that's
Do we
good.
want to?
Wes, you mentioned something which I wish I would have thought of referencing. You mentioned 75% or thereabouts opting in last time around. So that, I mean, that's a tremendous amount. That's higher than I remembered it being. Yes, and I think we're all remembering here, we're remembering as we got to the end of the year, the numbers were creeping lower and lower of active participation. And yes, and I'm definitely guilty myself more than once leaving the saliva that would have been collected on the coffee table as we ran out the door to get to school. So the idea that, again, this is collection in school, if coming out of the gate last year we had 75%, I can't see why we would have any less than that. And again, it just seems to me, it's again, as I say often about this board, we are a group of neighbors. And, we are, our schools are neighborhood schools. I want to be neighborly. I want to be a good neighbor. I want to present things to people in a way that feels friendly, not harsh. And I grant, you're right, that we've never been in a pandemic before. We were last year, I guess, but it's still, I don't want to lose that. And I want to go with a way of doing things, a way of presenting ourselves, a way of presenting the district, that we are still your neighborhood schools. We are responsible to you. We're listening to you. We want to hear your opinions. We're not, just looking to, push things on you. It just seems like it's a slightly different change in tone in my mind if we were to say this is 100% opt-in, or excuse me, opt-out. And I could be wrong.
Well, I think it's far easier to handle than a mandate, for sure.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, I think so.
So just looking at the numbers, which are interesting, our participation rate started the first week in January at 70%, went down to 69, and then gradually creeped up to 74, a little bit of, whatever, but by the time we got to April, May, we were at almost 75%, but yet the actual participation rate dropped. So we had more people consenting, but less people participating, which is weird. So I guess I was just looking through some of this earlier today, trying to weigh all this out. I think I was leaning more towards opt-out, because it feels like if we're going to have that many people theoretically consenting again, it would be easier to manage an opt-out than an opt-in, like as far as forms and stuff. I don't know if logistically that helps us or whatever, but I also think I could go and opt in, because I feel like this many people plus those coming back would probably continue to opt in. But I almost feel like the opt out, for a lot of the public health reasons you're pointing out, Dave, but just logistically collecting the forms and requiring people to actually initiate the opt in versus the number of people that have to initiate an opt out. It kind of feels like that's where most of the community is probably going to land anyway. So why not just sort of simplify it for people?
Do we have a sense, I know we're assuming the numbers would be much higher under an opt-out, but do we have a sense from SHIELD or either schools that may have participated last year? Are we talking 85, 90%? Where do we land between?
I don't know. I don't think I've asked them that question specifically. SHIELD was really new last spring. It was just being tried in a few schools. So I don't really know.
I just wonder what we're talking numbers-wise. Are we breaking even, essentially?
Right.
Assuming we are. We're making some assumptions.
Yeah, and my sense of that participation drop-off was certainly the forgetting. It was also for staff that were participating. I know I felt this way. I would do it, and I was like, wait, I'm vaccinated now. Do I still need to do it? Now U of I SHIELD is saying, if you're vaccinated, you do not need to participate. They're not suggesting that you do participate. So, and again, we know children under 12 are not vaccinated. So that's really the population that we want very much to, be participating in the saliva screening.
I mean, and the numbers I was throwing out were purely students, and we
Yeah.
don't have a breakout
Yeah.
between Hauser and elementary, so
Yeah.
that's, not sure how that would shake out with that, but.
I guess I'd like to sort of go back to the opt-in and opt-out. I mean, do we not, and I'm going off of memory here, but don't we have certain things already in place outside of this that we have to opt out of? Because I know each year that I have to opt out of certain things.
Yes.
And so it's, I mean, we already do that for certain things, so I guess my question is, well, how is this any different?
Well, I guess I would want that answer, what are we comparing it to? What are
So,
the things that-
so one of the examples, the one that comes to my mind immediately is Aaron's Law. So we do a required presentation around the prevention of sexual abuse. And because it's a very sensitive topic, it's something where we will send a communication to families and they can opt out.
There's I also-
Very small number of children opt out, but some do, very small number, like I would say under 5. That's the one that comes to mind. I think under policy, there's things like if you're doing, I don't think we even do this, animal dissection is one
Right,
that
no,
children
but-
can opt out of. David, you may.
Yeah, there's one that I opt out of, and that's like sort of publicity.
Okay, yeah.
With your child's
So you're
photos.
like participation in student directory, right? Okay, yeah. And that would be just,
That's a
that's
registration.
kind of explicit. That's in the registration portal and
Yeah.
you say you don't want your child's name listed.
Actually, that-
But there's also pictures too. and-
Yeah, there's the,
Yeah,
like,
use the media
image.
release, yeah.
Image
Mhm.
And that
publication.
actually brings, well, I guess most people have already registered, or everybody should have already registered by now, so I guess we can't use that as a communication tactic. Okay.
But they will be getting their class teacher and schedule soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although if we do the communication, I don't think, at least, maybe we could slide it into some, but I think to Linda's point of like the broad, clear communication, I almost think there needs to be, like, that is the only thing in that message.
Yeah,
so
that's
that-
okay too.
Yeah.
Make it very, very.
And then you could slip it in other places, but like, I think there
Yeah.
absolutely has to be clear communication about, like, a subject line that almost
Yeah.
says, opt-out required or
Yeah.
something like, I don't know, just
Yeah.
something that's very, very headline focused.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think I'm leaning towards opt-out.
Don't mean to laugh.
Dan,
This
I
is not-
already know where Dave is. Dan feels like he's opt-in.
Yeah.
Have you changed have you solidified an opinion or?
I have not solidified
Okay.
an opinion. I could be comfortable either way as long as there's a communication strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer opt-out just for the public health reasons. And obviously, I totally agree with Linda that if you're going to do it, you communicate it really well
So
and
we're-
often.
Opt out, opt out, opt out.
Similar to Linda, I prefer opt-in. I'm hopeful that we would get a high participation rate, but with the correct communication stream going out to parents to opt out, I would be comfortable landing there as well.
So opt-in or opt-out?
Stephanie and I are not being like super clear here.
Yeah.
Well, I
You're
think
sitting
our-
in a voting capacity. So
Well, I think it's been said that we can probably manage a decent communication effort, as Martha
Yeah.
said.
Yeah,
On that premise,
yeah.
Come back to you?
Come back to me.
All right, Joel, you're on the hot seat.
As I said, opt-in with the communication policy.
Or opt,
Sorry, opt-out with the communication policy.
We're gonna
I
have to say-
apologize. I have it
Looks
written
like we've
down,
got
I
a-
can't read mine already.
Direction then.
yeah,
That's
to
four.
four
At
to
this point,
42.
Yeah, forward, yeah.
And there's two who are like, I can see it, and let's just,
I
you know,
mean, it's
yeah.
not an official resolution, but
Right.
it's a straw poll, but.
Yeah.
Right, but this
Well,
is
we have
something
to
Martha
put it
needs
in
to
But by,
the
act on
but by
tomorrow.
approving the resolution, you're approving me to sort of act under board direction
Okay.
to take care of the safety protocols, which means if you, essentially by majority, are telling me tonight, the consent form I'm going to attach to a communication by the end of this week would be the opt-out form.
Yeah.
And I think with, and I question, and then my opinion associated, like whatever we do tonight could theoretically be changed before the start of school, but I think that would be really difficult to change course. You're communicating one thing and then all of a sudden you're communicating something else.
Yeah,
You have to be consistent.
We've got
Yeah,
to just,
I mean, we know what happens when we change course midstream.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be changing course.
just wanted to kind of throw that on the, can't back out.
The Shield provided sample language for opt-out,
Yeah,
correct?
it's
And that's what
using their
schools would be
consent form.
utilizing, it's their consent form to opt, okay.
Yeah.
So then in the vote, we are going to vote on the school opening plan with opt-out.
You're
I
directing
just wanna
me
make
to
sure I know what I'm
opt out.
voting.
And with the consent form, would it just be an attachment, or are you gonna include an additional communication? I would prefer both.
Yeah, and I think both is a good idea. So what I'd like to do, whether it's tomorrow or Friday, just depends on my ability to get it written. You know, I do want to communicate to families about the masks. I was planning to sort of include the mask part and then the saliva screening. I mean, to me, those are the two, you know, big key items about coming back to school. And then I could follow up with, you know, saliva screening, important opt-out form.
Right.
Kathy's my communication partner, so she's
Okay.
nodding, yes, right, yeah.
All right.
So do we need to confirm, your other bullet on here was the mask wearing, which has been made for us today,
Right.
and then the confirmation of health wellness in place of daily Raptor. Do you need guidance on that?
You know, the recommendation is to go with the sort of one-time families sort of a test, like, yes, I'm not going to send my child to school sick,
Right.
not doing the daily. I don't think the daily was necessarily the strong preventative measure. I think it became like, oh goodness, I have to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Families knew, like, you don't send your child to school sick. So, so I'm not concerned about that one. I mean, unless board members are, I'm comfortable with that one-time sort of agreement that you will not send your child to school sick.
Right, and considering that so many are actually contagious without symptoms, I'm not sure that is the main
Yeah.
factor.
Yeah.
It's a factor, but it's not gonna be
And
the only factor.
Maybe this sounds horrible of me, but it does just become a daily task that
Yeah.
I did most of the time before my children were even awake.
Yeah.
I did not have kids in District 96 last year, I'm just saying, it was something that just
Yeah.
became like, wake up, get that, and then if they did have symptoms, they didn't go to school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
so it
Yeah, you can
almost,
always
for
change
me,
it,
it
so.
almost felt like I'm just doing something for the sake of doing it.
I'm sure
And
as
then
the year
following-
went on, that's the
Yeah.
vast majority, that
Yeah.
it just, like you said, it becomes a daily
Yeah, so
task.
I don't know if it was super helpful,
Yeah.
so I'm very.
But
Yeah.
comfortable.
I guess
Yeah, and I think the children that we sort of had to hold up at the school door, quite literally, it was because their parent forgot. It
Yeah.
wasn't because they were coming
Yeah,
to school
I-
sick and
yeah.
they didn't want to admit it. You know, it was
Yeah.
really, it was, so I'd be very comfortable with the sort of the one
Well,
time.
and-
The poor
Yeah,
kid's
I'd-
waiting
I'd like-
outside.
Go on, Sherry.
Oh, I was just saying, then the poor kid is waiting outside when the parent forgets, and
Mhm.
it's very ostracizing, and, you know.
It seems like, well, not it seems like. One, everyone should know what the symptoms are at this point. There's certainly been enough other communication that
Yes,
isn't
we've been living with
D96
this.
related. Number two, I think the administrative headache, in addition to everything else, it's just not, it's another thing that people just check off without thinking. So I'd rather focus on more effective ways.
Mhm.
So I am going to ask, though, that we also send, possibly, especially at the beginning of the year, because to your point, it became repetitive, it's something you do, that we should send this communication out sort of frequently saying, don't send your kid to school
Yeah.
sick.
Yeah.
I guess the other question I have, and this is more logistical, is like, what if a parent does send a kid to school sick? How is that going to be handled with the kid?
They're sent home,
I
right?
think it's how it always is.
Yeah,
they're
Right,
sent
but I guess the
home.
the whole
Yeah.
quarantine period and what have you, are we gonna send them home, then are we gonna have to quarantine kids in school?
Well,
I
that's
mean, I
the-
guess that's where
yeah.
I'm sort of going then.
That's the part we're saying is still sort of evolving because we are now considered an area of high transmission. The scenario was starting to exist that you could bring the child, let's say, to the nurse's office. You could even administer a Binax now. You could call the family and say, you know, your child seems to be exhibiting some symptoms of a cold, which could also be COVID. You know, we could test them right here and now with the parent agreeing to do it, and potentially they stay. That is the part that's now changing. It's like, nope, that child goes home and potentially they're on a 10 or 14-day quarantine with even symptoms that resemble until they have maybe multiple tests. And again, Pam is back here. Pam and I have both been sort of the partners in tuning into the public health webinars and talking to our nurses. I mean, is there anything you would say differently about that in terms of the testing strategies for children who might have symptoms that could be COVID but might not be COVID?
No, at this point, it's just changing every day, and some guidance that we had, we're told that there's going to be a new update on Friday, so.
So So I think we'll know more before even the start of school. You know, I think we'll have some clarity there. But you know, what we're planning to have is sort of these tools at our disposal. Potentially the Buy Next Now quick test, the saliva screening, that an extra sample could be collected to be used diagnostically for a child, again, with the parent's agreement. Again, this idea of just not having to send children off to the testing sites, and, you know, the goal being safe in-school learning, right? So if a child's sick, they need to not be present. On the other hand, if it's not COVID, and it's really likely not COVID, and they're, you know, the exposure was really questionable, masks were on, social distancing was being observed, like, can we keep the child in school? You know, and how do we do so safely with these now more diagnostic tools in front of us? So that's really the goal, whether or not, given again the high transmission period that we are in, if that now no longer becomes an option to us. But I think I'll cross my fingers and say I hope that it would be an option available to us, you know, as things would hopefully be on the decline. And when I think about, you know, winter coming and thinking about hopefully a whole school year of, you know, normal school attendance, likely mask wearing for much of it, but regular screening, that we know that there were groups of children sent home for 10 and 14 days last year where we were pretty sure they hadn't been exposed, but they were by definition a close contact. So we had to do that. So by definition of those close contacts, can we?
And that's all determined by the Department of Public Health.
Yes.
So we don't
Yeah.
even have an option
Right.
in those procedures if a child comes
Right.
in sick.
Right, but those are the ones, that's where our nurses really were key implementers of all that.
But it definitely sounds like, if I'm interpreting this correctly, and based on what I'm reading, I'm hearing it from you too, but it's the public health policy is pushing more towards keeping kids in school versus keeping kids out of school. It felt, at least for me, it felt like it was how do we get them away?
Yeah.
Now it's like how do we keep them in?
Yeah,
So that's,
Yeah.
I think that's positive.
yeah.
That's what I interpreted from the statement today.
Yeah.
From
Yeah.
the governor's office.
Yeah, I was just, I don't want to necessarily say I interpret his comments, but you know, the goal is get kids in school and keep them in school. So if we need to all have masks on, there's a better chance now that, you know, transmission is less likely to occur, close contacts are less likely to occur. So yeah, I absolutely agree. We need children in school. As we all know, their lives have been very disrupted by this, and you know, if we can make it less disruptive.
And I know the mask wearing isn't something that, I mean, our hands are tied with that one right now, but as that policy shifts, if Pritzker does go back to local decision-making or whatever, I do think that would be, I mean, that, to me, that'd be a substantial change to this plan, so thinking about the resolution, any substantial changes need to be vetted out, so it would definitely be another discussion point as to how we tackle
I would
that.
agree. I don't know, is there any thought to that if, you know, again, this just kind of came up today, if that mandate were you know, backed off of and it came back to us for our input, what would the thought be? Would you come back to the board at that point, or?
Yeah, you know, and my sense was even prior to the governor making it a mandate, we were leaning toward that, right? You know, just through informal conversation, you know, that I know at one point we had a question of could vaccinated adults, teachers specifically, but even vaccinated children 12 and up, could they be maskless in the schools? And that was a challenging decision for us to contemplate and consider. And so I think this idea of then, you know, everybody is masked, we aren't having to sort of alter that plan. I think we would come back to the board. I think it's going to depend on transmission. I think we'll hear from our staff. Our staff taught in masks all last year. You know, I did meet with our REC leadership this morning. You know, we were anticipating that the mandate was going to come through, but you know, they're comfortable. They want to be safe too. So, you know, they're comfortable with the idea of being in masks. I will add that, and I'm very proud of this, as is our REC leadership, 100% of our certified staff are vaccinated. So that's, I think, just a huge accomplishment. I think it speaks to the work of the school district, the work of the community, the work of the REC. We have a few other support staff, but a very small number. I mean, we are so close to 100%, and we're working on it. So encouraging everybody to get vaccinated. But
So this doesn't, it's sounding like I'm hearing you say that you would rely on previous guidance if it were to come back to local control again?
That's not what I heard.
No, I think it's
Okay.
gonna depend on where we are with transmission. I think it's
Okay.
gonna depend on what other school
I think
districts are.
just
No,
like
you-
last year with passing this resolution, giving Martha the authority to make the changes, but every time there's a change, we had a very large discussion at the board table, because
Yeah.
that is the way
A
it leads.
substantial change, yeah.
Yeah.
And this
Or-
would be a
or-
substantial change.
Right, so that's-
Just like we went back, when we went back after.
Yeah,
after
so we had a
break.
resolution last year allowing Martha to make these decisions, but every time there was a substantial change, we had this conversation at the table and gave her direction. So that's, you know, you've already showed that that's what's gonna happen, so I'm very confident that that's what would happen.
And it would be-
If there's a change in mask
I think,
mandating.
Dan, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to rephrase, I think, Martha, you had said, like, at the last meeting, we were leaning towards going all mask. And I think Dan was asking, based on that comment, no, you would actually come back to us to revisit
Yeah.
that conversation.
I would have bet money today that we were going all masks regardless of vaccination status before the governor's mandate. It would have been my recommendation, you know,
Just based on the last
yeah,
conversation.
it's
but
even the
not-
parent
yeah.
feedback we've had, right? I
Right.
mean, it's not a public comment, but I know, you all know as board members, you've received a lot of emails from parents in our community saying, we're comfortable having our masks on, do what's safest for our children. And, you know, a few maybe of
yeah.
parents of older children saying it'd be nice for my child not to come to school with a mask on now that he or she is vaccinated. But it didn't seem that there was a
No.
lot of vehemence or concern there. It was, if anything, the great majority of communications we had were, thank you for keeping our children safe, we're okay wearing masks.
But as everything shifts, we will be talking to the board table.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just, my overall thought is we're in a very fluid situation
Yes,
now.
100%.
And again, from, based on, you know, what I've heard of studies in flight, that students, you know, representing the bulk of our enrollment may be eligible for the vaccine before the school year is out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we had heard fall, now maybe it's winter, you know, but but no, and, you know, and the good news is we meet every other week, essentially, you know, twice a
Yes.
month. So I don't think there'd be such an urgent situation that we would need to be shifting around mask wearing in a short, you know, making a short-term decision on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are we
So plan, yeah. I was
ready
just
to,
gonna say, plan is
vote? Just looking at the
presented
time?
Yeah,
and
right.
just-
With mask
Yes.
wearing, with confirmation, a one-time confirmation of screening or of.
Well, how do we do
health
this? Because normally I'm reading out the whole resolution, and this is quite a mouthful. So several mouthfuls. What are our thoughts on that? I mean, I
wellness.
can.
Like the whole page?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Did you
wondering.
do that last time?
No, I don't
No, I
believe
don't
so.
think that's-
I think it's just plan as presented.
The
It was a plan
resolution.
last time.
I think you just need to call out the three items that were.
Do we
well,
have
maybe the
spots in
two
this
items.
resolution for that?
No, we don't, and I think we're voting on the resolution
Yeah,
with kind of board
We're voting on the plan presented.
feeling.
Yeah.
But the plan is not presented with opt-in or opt-out and with a one-time, a clear decision as whether we're doing one-time or daily
I
raptor.
think those could be mentioned.
That's what I'm saying, I think we just need to
But-
mention it.
Right.
But we're just approving the resolution, which if you read it,
Because
Allows
the plan is
language.
presented, but the plan does not state those things.
No.
But you have
So-
through your public board meeting voiced those
yeah.
preferences.
Okay.
It says
You've directed me in such a
substantially
way.
in the form
Yeah.
presented.
Right.
I think those things are pretty
I think you're good.
substantial, but if you guys are comfortable with it, I'm
It's
fine.
fine.
I'm
Okay.
comfortable with it.
Yes.
Well, did we want to call those out again, or we're just going as with our previous comments?
Martha, would you like us to call them out again, or are you?
I'm comfortable. I think I guess I could, it's opt-out on the, an opt-out process on the saliva screening, obviously the mask mandate per the governor's order, the one-time attestation of wellness, or not sending your child to school sick.
Right, yep.
Okay.
And that is
That's
the current
everyone's okay
plan.
on that?
Mhm.
Yep,
Okay. Are we ready to vote?
yep.
Yep.
All right, Kathy, can you call the roll?
Mr. Marvel?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Gunn?
Aye.
Ms. Piper?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
And Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, next then is the shield testing agreement. Is there a motion to approve the Shield Illinois COVID-19 testing support agreement as presented?
So moved.
Second,
All right, is there any discussion?
feel like we already had it.
Yeah.
Seems like it. All right, Kathy, can you call the roll?
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Gunn?
Aye.
Ms. Clyber?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Marvel?
Aye.
And Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, and then next is a brief Hollywood construction update.
We should have done this one first.
That's what we said
Ramesh
last
likes
time.
sitting through this.
Ramesh, you need to tell us.
That's okay.
So 2 weeks ago, we talked about the fact that we had a potential tank at Hollywood. Well, we do have a situation for which we pulled a permit. It was a 6-week process, but we managed to compress it down to a week. And we're going to be pulling the tank this Friday.
Oh, wow.
There's a potential that there may not be a tank, but we do have contaminated soils we have to address. But we're going to address it correctly this time and get the EPA's letter for no further action. That's the important step that we need to get done. So it's all happening this Friday. The existing school will open on the 23rd. We're making sure that process is completed. The addition is going to stretch out a little bit more because of complications regarding material supplies, but it'll all be done sometime in September is the plan for right now. But the exterior will be finished by the 23rd. Central, great shape. We already start getting our occupancies, about 90% done. We will finish early next week.
Great.
Thank you
Great.
very much.
In regards to that tank though, so the way you're describing it now, it doesn't sound like anything that's going to need to be replaced once it's pulled out, correct?
No, this is an old heating oil tank from the 1940s.
Mhm.
The tank was actually pulled in 1990. Now the current investigation shows that the tank was removed, but they didn't remove all of it. So the pipes that were there, which are below grade, have leaked. And that's what's caused the contamination.
Okay.
And we
That's
can't
strange.
just leave it there. It has to be addressed because otherwise we'll be covering a problem and it'll come back to haunt us later.
Yep.
So
So is this
just out
going
of
to be less
curiosity,
expensive
Yeah,
than we
why would
initially
they be allowed
thought
to
because
do
of the tank being present, or does it change?
Yes and no.
Okay.
We can't, what do I say? We can't tell the environmental guys not to show up.
Yeah.
They have to show up
Right.
with the tanks, the process, the whole, the whole 9 yards. But the state fire marshal's inspector will be on site on Friday. So he'll give us the thumbs up or thumbs down. He'll inspect the pipes, he'll make sure that all contaminants are removed, and otherwise he'll write up an incident report for us, which is a problem. So as far as we do it right, he'll sign off saying that we did all the right stuff. Then we take that and we've got to file it to the EPA saying that everything was removed, it's closed. We get that NFA letter. It takes about 30 to 60 days to get that.
Mhm.
But the fact that we're getting this permit in like 24 hours, and we're getting this work done this Friday
Yeah.
was actually pretty incredible.
I was gonna say, this sounds way more optimistic
Yeah.
than the last time we
Right.
we
Yeah.
talked.
Yeah.
So that's great.
I mean, the state fire marshal worked with us.
Oh,
They were
that's
very
fantastic.
helpful. They understood the school. I mean, Jim and I were on the phone with them for about an hour and a half. They actually wrote the permit for us.
Wow.
We didn't even have to file the application.
But the
Thank
fact
you.
that there's not an actively leaking tank, it's just more of the residual stuff, that should be significantly less expensive. in the
Correct, we don't have to
removal
pay for the
process.
physical tank removal, but they will come as if there is the tank, because the
Yeah.
permit states
Right.
that a tank has to be removed.
Okay.
And it was the soil removal that's particularly expensive, correct?
Very expensive.
Oh, okay. It's the
Soils.
soil, not the, okay.
And there are underground pipes which were not capped properly, which have leaked. So we have to take all that out, we cap it back into the boil room, so nothing underground will leak again.
so just out of curiosity, I mean, I know this was done in the past, but how was that missed? I mean,
Right, was that acceptable?
I mean, did
Don't
the,
know, it was done in 1990.
I mean, who would have missed that? Would it have been like the EPA would have missed it, or who?
The EPA actually gave us a letter saying that we are all clear, but they never closed it on their website. That's what triggered this whole process.
Okay.
We actually have a letter from them dated 1990 saying no further action required,
Huh.
but they never closed it on the web. And that's what created, none of the dumpsters, none of the waste management sites would accept our spoils, because they said that we have this open issue.
Oh,
Mm.
Very interesting.
somebody didn't finish their
Well,
inspection
thank
properly.
you.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't finish.
We can't find anybody that was here at that time to blame, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, we checked, Bill joined in 2001. so.
Did you have an update also on the playground, like the equipment For the Hollywood playground?
Yes, the Hollywood playground equipment's supposed to arrive end of August, and the installation will take place in the first week of September. Again, but we won't be able to open that section till the rest of the school is completed. We have to finish the exterior work completely, get the occupancy for the multi-purpose room, and then open it up. But we're looking forward to about 30 days off for that section, but it'll get done.
We met today, Ramesh and Kim Hefner, Bill Radke, Jim Fitton, just to talk through, the fences will be up still, right?
Yes.
But we talked about, obviously, safe student access in and out of the building, still having an outdoor play and learning area. And we are asking the zoo if we could have a few extra spaces while the construction project is being finished up. So they said they're looking into that, but that would sort of be a great solution for us
It
to
should be
have.
a slower season for them anyway.
Right, that's why I'm hoping it wouldn't be a big problem for them to give us, just during the school day, during,
Right.
essentially the month of September.
Usually
September,
not quite.
Yeah.
And safety and security is the prime mover for this process. So we've told the contractor that as of August 23rd, when the kids come back, that becomes the number one priority. I mean, if they have to stop working, if they're creating too much noise, it's on them.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah,
Thanks, Rich.
Look, 6 o'clock, it's like perfect timing.
Yeah.
Wow.
thanks for the update, definitely. All right.
I agree with you, anytime he comes, we should.
All right, so at this time, is there a motion to enter into closed session for the purpose of discussing self-evaluation, practices and procedures, or professional ethics when meeting with the representative of a statewide association of which the district is a member?
So moved.
Second.
Kathy, can you call the roll?
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Gunn?
Aye.
Ms. Clyber?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Marvel?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
And Mr. Hunt?
Aye.